May the 10th, 2025, Munna Duke and Youngin headed to the north side of Chicago to the Edgewater neighborhood for a fun night out, as they were celebrating fellow Oblock veteran Glish's birthday. They would spend the night at the Pork Chop Barbecue Restaurant and Bar on the 6300 block of North Broadway. But as
Now, video from that paperwork that's catching everyone's attention right now is this one particular detail that's suddenly blowing up. It's all about how Lil Durk was apparently feuding with Munna Duke from Oblock, and that members of OTF were allegedly planning to target Oblock members because they believed Oblock wasn't properly retaliating for King Von's death. Now, I've got this thread pulled up on Chirac-ology, okay? And there are some really interesting points in the comments that I want to go through, especially about this alleged tension with Munna Duke. So let me read this again. According to the paperwork, there's evidence that defendants Banks and others were involved in the murder of Savai Robinson, who is Quando Rondo's cousin. The claim is that they were trying to get revenge on another rival of defendant Lil Durk, supposedly under his direction. Specifically, in April 2023, text messages between defendant Banks and several OTF members, including Didi, Antonio Jones aka Boonmo, and confidential informant number 1, reportedly showed that Banks had a feud with Oblock member Munna Duke. The reason? Banks believed Oblock members weren't properly retaliating for Bennett's death, which refers to King Von. In the thread, Lil Durk allegedly says, "I'm going to pipe it up." Then Boonmo replies, "Blood is green," followed by a car emoji and a green light emoji, adding, "Getting it together now, no phones." And according to the documents, as part of the discovery produced to the defense, the government expects the informant to testify that in response to Durk's alleged direction to take revenge on Oblock members, PW1 and Boonmo purchased a vehicle using funds from defendant Banks. The alleged plan was to travel to Oblock and target whichever members they could find. The informant is also expected to testify that PW1 believed he would be paid by Durk for each conspirator killed. However, the plan reportedly never went through because of heavy police presence in Oblock that night. Now, I want to address something real quick. I slightly misspoke at the beginning of my last video. I made it sound like Didi, Durk, and Boonmo were all sliding together, but that's not exactly what the paperwork says. From what's being reported, Didi was just in the group chat. The ones who allegedly got the car and attempted the slide were the confidential informant and Boonmo. So Didi was present in the messages, but not actually involved in the attempt itself. I just want to make that very clear. I didn't fully explain that in the last video, and the way I presented the names might have made it sound like Didi was out there sliding too. The documents aren't claiming that. They're saying he was simply part of the group chat where the alleged green light was discussed. There was also another moment in my previous video where I mixed up Vonnie and FDD while talking. At one point, I said something like Didi might have joined later and didn't really know everything going on. That part was actually about Vonnie, not Didi. Because let's be real, Didi was really active in those streets. He was facing a body case, he eventually came home, and when he returned, it was basically a hero's welcome. There was even that King Von lyric on Beat That Body with THF Bazoo, where Von said, "Snitch K, I just talked to D, he gonna be home gang." So yeah, Didi was known as a real stepper. Vonnie, on the other hand, allegedly got involved later and leaned more toward the industry side of things. Anyway, I just wanted to clear that up so everyone can properly follow what's going on. Now, let's circle back to Munna Duke, because a lot of people in the comments are pointing something out that's really interesting. The documents clearly state, plain English, black and white, that Lil Durk was feuding with Oblock member Munna Duke over the belief that Oblock wasn't properly retaliating for King Von's death. But that might not have been the only reason Durk had issues with him. If you know this story closely, you might remember another layer to this situation. Around that same time period, roughly 2023, Munna Duke reportedly got into a relationship with D-Thang's wife. For those who don't know, D-Thang was Lil Durk's brother who was killed. After his death, there were several alleged retaliation incidents, and multiple people reportedly died in the aftermath. But here's where things get messy. Munna Duke allegedly ended up in a relationship with the woman who had been married to Durk's late brother, and they even had a child together. So when you look at that situation, it's easy to see why some people believe there could have been deeper personal tension between Durk and Munna Duke beyond the street politics. Think about it. Munna Duke having a baby with the woman who had been married to Durk's deceased brother. That definitely adds another layer to the story and makes people wonder if Durk's alleged issues with Munna Duke were more personal than just street loyalty. When you go through the comments on that thread, people are clearly shocked. Some are saying they can't believe it if it's true. Others are pointing out that Slide for Vaughn was something that seemed to be weighing heavily on Durk at the time. Some even referenced rumors that Durk once told someone to wear 3 ski masks. But again, what really stands out in these comments is how often people bring up Munna Duke and D-Thang's baby mother. Some commenters say the situation alone might have fueled the tension. Others say people were already talking about Durk and Duke having issues back then, long before these documents surfaced. One person even said people were saying they were beefing 2 years ago, now everyone acting shocked. Another commenter said they understood why Durk might have been frustrated, especially if he believed people walking around with Oblock chains weren't stepping up to retaliate for King Von. Then the conversation takes another turn. Someone asks whether the internal beef might actually be why Munna Duke got involved with D-Thang's wife in the first place. And that's where things get really interesting. Because some people always assumed the relationship happened first and that it sparked the tension. But this comment flips the idea around. They're suggesting that maybe Durk and Munna Duke were already beefing, and that Munna Duke getting involved with D-Thang's wife could have been a way to disrespect Durk and his late brother. If that theory were true, that would be a wild level of disrespect. Now, let's look at the timeline for a second. The documents mention the alleged feud happening around April 2023. Meanwhile, Munna Duke and D-Thang's baby mother publicly had a child in November 2023. That's about 7 months later, which means if the child was born in November, the pregnancy likely began around the same time the alleged feud was already happening. So it's entirely possible the relationship was already underway during that period of tension. And that's why people online are saying the situation is getting even more complicated the more details come out. Some commenters think the baby mother situation started the beef. Others think the beef started first and the relationship came later as a form of disrespect. Right now, no one knows for sure. What we do know is that the timeline overlaps in a way that raises a lot of questions. And honestly, the entire situation just shows how messy things can get when street politics, personal relationships, and loyalty all collide. Some commenters even jumped straight to the conclusion that Durk sent OTF members to target any Oblock member. Others pushed back on that idea, pointing out that the only person actually named in the messages was Munna Duke, suggesting the issue might have been more personal than random. One person even believes that Durk might have been trying to get Duke specifically targeted. Another comment brought up something strange. They said when Munna Duke and Young were killed, people online were posting RIP threats to everybody Ken. So, with all of this being said, I want to go back to my previous video about the murder of Munna Duke. I want to recap everything that happened and refresh both my memory and yours about the events surrounding his death and what unfolded afterward. Because to this day, this case is still a huge mystery in Chicago history. It's a major unanswered question in the streets. No arrests have been made. No one has officially been tied to it. And honestly, after seeing Munna Duke's name pop up in these alleged tensions involving Lil Durk, I never expected that connection to appear. But now that it has, it definitely raises more questions. It's even possible, and I'm just saying possible, that this case could eventually get tied into a larger indictment connected to Durk or people around him. So let's go back and break down everything that happened in the Munna Duke case, step by step, and see if revisiting the timeline gives us any new context.
The evening at the restaurant came to a close, and Duke, Young'un, and their group exited the restaurant. At least 2 gunmen, who had reportedly been hanging out in front of the restaurant waiting for them, would jump out of a vehicle, firing at least 50 shots, hitting Duke, Young'un, and a third man who some thought to have been Domo from the 600 set, a brother of the founder of 600 called D-Thang. Unfortunately, both Young'un and Duke would tragically pass away, and thankfully, the third man ended up surviving. The aftermath of the shooting was recorded by passers-by that showed Young'un's lifeless body laying on the pavement.
I don't know what's going on. You straight? You got a shirt? Yeah.
An officer familiar with the investigation told newspapers how security video showed the gunman escaping in a stolen Infiniti Q50, which cops found less than 2 hours after the shooting, abandoned and burning on the 600 block of East 134th Place, almost 30 miles south from the scene of the shooting in the far south side. Munna Duke had posted a story on his social media just 6 hours before the incident. His last Instagram story featuring him in the car, with whom many believe
Munna Duke and Young made their way to the north side of Chicago, specifically the Edgewater neighborhood, for what was supposed to be a fun night out. The crew was celebrating fellow Oblock veteran Glee's birthday. They ended up spending the evening at the Pork Chop Barbecue restaurant and bar located on the 6300 block of North Broadway. Now, just to pause and really look at some of these details for a second. According to reports, they were out celebrating a pretty well-known Oblock member, Glee. It was his birthday. And if you look at some of that paperwork, it also mentions that people were allegedly trying to target anyone connected to Oblock. Now, we don't know yet if these events are actually connected. We don't know who might be responsible, or whether somebody inside the circle could have backdoored the situation and dropped the location, but it definitely makes the situation more interesting. This whole thing is wild because we're talking about members from Oblock, a very notorious crew. If you've been following this story, you already know Munna Duke had previously been suspected in several killings tied to the so-called Get Back campaign after T. Roy, the best friend of King Von, was killed. And honestly, it feels like history might be repeating itself. These details become even more interesting when you remember that there were allegations floating around that Lil Durk wanted retaliation against anyone from Oblock. And then suddenly, something like this
story
happens.
Featuring him in the car, with whom many believe to be Youngin, Domo, and Domo's sister, listening to G Herbo and flexing jewelry including his Oblock chain. Meanwhile, Youngin's last post was ominously captioned, "We outside, DM the gang for the location," and Youngin too would be spotted wearing his Oblock chain at the gathering. It would be one such Oblock chain, allegedly splattered with blood, that Duke and Youngin's alleged killers would post not long after the murder, snatched off an Oblock member's corpse, or at least that's what the posters wanted everyone to think. News of the deaths begun to spread quickly online, with associates confirming Munna Duke and Youngin's passing through heartfelt posts, including those members of Oblock who were particularly close with the two, like Muwop, Duke's alleged right-hand man in the murder of Get Right. Munna Duke had also recently become a father, welcoming a child with the former partner of
But there's another detail that caught people's attention. One of the guys involved posted, "Laugh now, cry later." Now, if that phrase sounds familiar, it's the title of the song by Drake featuring Lil Durk. That track actually dropped not long after FBG Duck was killed.
The former partner of OTF D-Thang, the late brother of rapper Lil Durk. But following him and Youngin's death, it wasn't just those close to them paying their respects, as the well-known ops of Oblock, like STL, EBT, Taekwon World, and Gyro City, would immediately begin to troll on social media. Taekwon World members paying tribute to their fallen friend Poppy, this playing to the long-held rumor that Duke had been involved in his murder. But surprisingly, none of them would pay tribute to Get Right, which many people on Reddit would argue was actually proof that Duke wasn't one of the shooters in that case. But meanwhile, Oblock and their younger generations like TSG would make social media posts promising get back, with members of TSG announcing to the world, and probably the police, that they were already busy sliding on their ops, posting on social media asking where the ops are and that they must have gone into hiding knowing that Oblock was on hunting time. But announcing to the world, and probably the police, that they were already busy sliding on their ops, posting on social media asking where the ops are and that they must have gone into hiding knowing that Oblock was on hunting time. But who they were hunting is a completely different matter, as it seems that when it comes to the possible suspects, there are many different theories. One of the leading drill reporters in Chicago, or drill historian as he calls himself, Truth Teller TV, would suggest that the murder may well have been in retaliation for the murder of rapper FBG Duck, meaning that the suspects may be from the sets close by Oblock, like STL EBT, aka Tukaville, where Duck was from, or possibly Taekwon World, which has many members closely affiliated with Duck's set.
You know, it's a real war going on. It's already talk in the street that this is get back for FBG Duck. And they did this for FBG Duck. I'm not sure. I don't want to throw that out, you know. But I can tell you it looked like they were targeted and murdered. The streets are talking and people saying this revenge for Duck. You know?
Another YouTuber from Chicago, also known as a Gyro City original and a close friend of FBG Duck, FYB J-Main, would take to his YouTube channel to comment on the situation, racking up hundreds of thousands of views within a matter of days, and reporting on the murders with a somber tone, despite being from the rival area.
Sad day in Chicago, bruh. Two of the main Oblockians lost their lives last night, bro, due to gun violence in Chicago, bro. We don't know what's going on, bro. So it's kind of early to start pointing fingers and all of that. It's never a good feeling when you lose a brother, you lose somebody who close to you, you even lose somebody a friend that you could be able to call.
As those who have followed the Chicago drill scene know, despite J-Main's previous involvement in the gang war as a member of a gang who was some of the main rivals of Oblock, he spent the last few years pushing peace in the Chicago drill community and trying to build bridges between people from rival gangs, even visiting Oblock himself in vlogs while attempting to repair the fractures between these two warring communities.
One comment said something interesting. Nowadays,
we got homework on my guy. One of the original Oblockians taking me to the O right now. Let us start here.
We represent that Muslimatic, man. Represent that Muslimatic. We live here in Oblock. We got J-Main, we got DQ from Oblock. We bring it, man. We making peace. We pushing peace and prayer on purpose. Alhamdulillah, the brothers gonna make peace right here on camera.
I'm not going to go too deep into that.
However, not everyone was welcoming J-Main with open arms, and during a subsequent visit to Oblock, he was forced to flee the scene after Oblock veteran E-Dog turned up, furious about J-Main making comments about him in interviews.
Some said that one faction wasn't even present when Ken was killed. Others claimed more was there that day. Then there were people saying those locals already...
He got me on DJ. He can't do this.
Munna Duke had actually come out after this visit and dissed J-Main too, suggesting that it was disrespectful of him to pose with his cereal brand in front of King Von's mural whilst also wearing a ski mask. It's understandable why Oblock members might have felt some type of way, because before J-Main was pushing peace, he was known for pulling stunts like going to Oblock with a machine gun on him. After apparent pressure behind the scenes, J-Main would take to his channel once again, giving a chilling update on how he's been warned about pushing peace with his former rivals, given just how deadly the beef still is.
Motherfuckers telling me now, J-Main, you better keep it on you now. Two Oblockians just got whacked. You even the Whoop man out here pushing his peace and you out here trying to stop the violence. But whole time, when shit like this happen, it's kind of a smack in the face. Do something different in my life, bro. Either you gonna respect me or you not.
But somewhat surprisingly, suspicions on the culprits of this double murder would also begin to fall on Oblock's former friends, Front Street, as online sleuths would claim that the person in the pictures holding the Oblock chain while wearing a ski mask was actually a Front Street member called Bauer, who, according to online detectives, is tied to at least two other murders, these being towards Front Street and Oblock's common enemies, the murder of Cord from STL EBT in 2021 and Lil Take from Taekwon World in 2022. Then, another leaked image would get posted on Reddit, showing another alleged member of Front Street wearing the same chain, the caption simply being a series of laughing emojis. But as the person who had posted the image would notice that it had been shared on Reddit, he would seemingly decide to delete his entire Instagram account, with the Redditors predicting that their self-snitching had made certain that they would get caught. Meanwhile, Oblock would catch wind of the rumors floating around the net, with both Ike Munna and Ocho Munna commenting on a post saying that the chain isn't Youngun's or Duke's. And in reality, it seems unlikely that anyone would spend time trying to remove a chain off someone's neck in such a public place, not knowing if the victim's friends were going to return fire at any moment. Meanwhile, other Reddit detectives have pointed out how the getaway vehicle was found burning literally right next to the Aldgeld Gardens, the home of OTF Chuckies, an Action Savages ghoulie gang, aka Bloodbath, while their members would also post subliminal Instagram posts, like an emoji showing two fingers up, this seemingly implying that they had just caught two of their ops. If these rumors are true, this could mean that Oblock is about to face some very difficult times, and the question becomes, who would Lil Durk and his OTF affiliates side with? They're longtime friends from Oblock, who have done many things with Durk and for Durk, but who have recently lost many key members due to death or prison, or Ghoulie Gang, whose rapper Chucky is currently one of the top artists on Lil Durk's OTF label, which desperately needs somebody to bring in money now that Durk will likely stay locked up for a long time. Many people seem to think that this case could be solved any day now, if the Chicago police are just willing to allocate some of the required resources, but they often take their time, and only time will tell if anyone is going to face justice. So for now, I just want to say rest in peace to Munna Duke and Youngun, and for anybody watching this growing up in these kind of harsh environments that I'm talking about in this video, stay safe, and remember, the streets are and the gang lifestyle only tends to end one of two ways. So don't crash out, and remember that you are worthy of a long and fulfilling life. Thanks for watching.
Misleading information to the grand jury, including edited video clips and selective evidence to strengthen their argument against Durk. The defense claims that if the jury had seen the full context, there might not have been enough evidence to bring the indictment. Because of that, some people online believe the case could eventually be challenged in court. Others think the unnamed shooter mentioned in the documents could be Ken, which might explain why his name doesn't appear directly in the indictment. Reddit threads are full of speculation. Some users say it's more likely that another individual known as Jam was involved. Others say Ken fits the timeline better, especially since he died last year. Some even pointed out that a person who used to be around Durk constantly moved to California right after King Von died. So the theories keep flying, but the main thing people are saying is this: when certain F members posted tributes to Ken right after the deaths of Duke and Youngin, it looked like they were celebrating revenge. In their eyes, Ken had allegedly died earlier in this ongoing conflict, possibly during an incident where Munna Duke was present. Now, let's be clear, none of that has been confirmed. We still don't know who was responsible for Munna Duke. Some comments claim it was a backdoor setup. Others think it was retaliation tied to older conflicts. At this stage, there's simply no solid proof. But one thing is obvious: the tension between different factions connected to Oblock seems deeper than people originally thought. There may be layers to this feud that outsiders never realized existed. It also doesn't help that there were already rumors about friction between Lil Durk and Munna Duke related to the Slide for Von movement after the death of King Von. Add in the complicated personal connections, including reports that Munna Duke was having a child with the mother of Durk's nephew, and suddenly the situation becomes even messier. Right now, this story's still developing. There are a lot of unanswered questions. I'm going to keep digging deeper into the Ken angle, the back and forth between these factions, and whether Lil Reese actually had any role in the online reactions. Because honestly, I didn't even know half of this information before today. So I'm going to keep researching, and as soon as more details come out, I'll come back with another update. This story is far from over.